Welcome to the campaign strategy section of my Lizardmen race guide. This part will focus on the campaign gameplay and strategy for the Lizardmen, including starting out, later expansion, and the different sub-factions. Disclaimer, this guide is based on my personal experiences and opinions and is by no means the definitive way to play the Lizardmen in Mortal Empires. If you have a different strategy or want to add something to mine, please leave a comment down below. Little bonus disclaimer for this one, some of these words are really hard to say, so I apologise in advance for butchering your favourite factions or places. If you'd like to send a complaint, please email uratw@mate.co.uk. With that being said, let's get into the video. There are 4 choices of factions when playing as the Lizardmen, and who you choose will make some serious differences to how they play in both campaign and battle, and what you should be aiming to achieve.
Hold on a sec. Okay, before we get into this actual video, I just want to let you know, guys, I have got a giveaway going for the Game of Total War Warhammer 2. If it wasn't evident already, this is kind of, what the video is all about. So if you want to enter, all you have to do is click the link in the description. I might be able to put it in a card. I'm not exactly sure how all that works. I'll try my best. I'll link it everywhere that I can. So you just click that link, you go in, you don't need to like, you don't need to subscribe, you don't need to share, you don't need to do any of that. You just need to give me your name and your email and your credit just so I can get in contact with you and I'm not just being like, hello there anonymous person who I sent a carrier pigeon to the ether. You can do some other things, it is Gleam, you can visit the page, you can visit the Facebook page, the Twitter page, Instagram page, stuff like that. But that's just for you to increase your entries if you so want to do that. It is completely going to be totally random. I'm not going to pick someone that's done 7 or someone that's done 1. It's going to be completely random. I would ask that if you have the game, you do not enter. If you want this game for a friend, tell them to enter themselves. If you have this game, I will check your Steam account. If you have the game already, I will not be giving you the codes. I'm very sorry about that. Just tell your friends to enter if you want them to enter. This will be running until the 19th of September at midnight. It will end and then I'll be announcing the winner very shortly after on Discord, after I've gotten in contact with them and passed the code over after I've checked that they don't own the game. So you have up until then to enter. Good luck to everyone and let us go straight back to the guide. For the purposes of this guide, I played as Hexotal, as they're the original Lizardmen added in Warhammer 2. They start in Hexotal, funnily enough, and as starts go it could be a lot worse. The first thing I did was take out the nearby Skeggy army with auto-resolve as they didn't pose much of a threat. Once they were contained to their settlement, I moved to take the fallen gates from some Skaven, which required me to recruit units for a couple of turns to ensure my army was big enough to take the settlement. I had to manually fight the battle as it was fairly close, but I got the settlement and stopped the production of Skaven corruption before it could get too much of a hold on the province. This meant I could take the rest of the settlements in relative leisure as my public order wasn't declining too quickly. After this I colonised the ruins at the Ziggurat of Dawn and let my army replenish to take on the Skeggy settlement. Once they had, I quickly moved in and manually fought a close battle and took the settlement with a handful of units to spare. This caused the nearby New World colonies to declare war on me since the balance of power had shifted. Unfortunately for them, I now had a full province worth of gold coming in to fund a bunch of new units. Within a few turns they were severely outnumbered and I took their 2 settlements within 5 turns of war being declared. The rest of the province they were living in was all ruins, so I colonised 2 more settlements before turning my attention south to the Blue Vipers and the Drowned. This war lasted a little longer, as the Blue Vipers just loved to make full stacks of savage orc boys, making their settlements very tough to take out. Around this time I started building army number 2, and once they got down to support me, I quickly mopped up and had a 3rd region under my control. Around this time I recruited a skink chief assassin and used him as a scout to discover the nearby Lizardmen so that I could establish trade and alliances with them. Once he'd found everyone on my continent, I sent him across the sea to find Tlakor and the last defenders in the southeast of the map. Getting good relations this early means that later in the game it will be very easy to confederate your allies and expand your control even more. Confederation can't be done as thoughtlessly as other factions though, as the fragile early game economy makes it hard to maintain your many armies. This means it's worth checking what your allies have before you take it on to ensure you can support it. After all my scouting and tea parties with other lizards, I started going after the various undead and Skaven factions that were attacking my allies, and I took a few more settlements on the mainland. Once the enemies were gone, I was left with the entire continent under my allies or my control, and the chaos wasn't even getting down to me to make any effect. My economy was strong enough that I could build a bunch of endgame stacks and clean up anything that remained with relative ease. It's worth noting that I had 2 attempts at this campaign, because Vashnar's conquest came and took 3 of my settlements, which basically put me at a standstill, as for some reason, the second he takes a settlement, it gains a ridiculously strong garrison. Not to mention he himself has a stupidly strong army right out the gate, which will crush any early game units you throw at him.
So that wasn't fun, but once I expanded faster, I didn't run into him, and he didn't ruin my life. For the most part, the other factions play fairly similar from what I can tell. Hexotal and the Last Defenders play basically the same, apart from starting location. Tlaqua has access to a different rite, that I'll come back to, and the Cult of Sotek has the option to make sacrifices that offer various effects both in campaign and battle. There's quite a variety of effects to choose from, so it would take too long to list them all, but I'll be sure to show them on screen, so feel free to pause and take a look. It's worth noting that to make sacrifices, you need a certain number of battle captives, which works in a very similar way to the Dark Elves, in that you have a post-battle option that will get you lots of them. All the factions have the Geomantic Web, which empowers your commandments based on what buildings you have in your provincial capitals within the pylon tree. I'll show you just how it affects your commandments a little later, but it's definitely worth putting some money into. They also all get access to the unique movement stance, Astromancy. It grants you increased vision the following turn at the cost of reduced movement range. It also gives you a better chance of detecting ambushes and intercepting underway movements, as well as granting some units Vanguard deployment upon entering battle. All Lizardmen factions also get given decisions every few turns that give you many different effects for campaign and battle. They're often paired with good and bad effects, so no matter what you choose, there is a trade-off for whatever bonus you're getting. All of the Lizardmen also have the same climate preference of Savannah, Desert and Jungle being habitable, Temperate, Mountain, Magical Forest and Temperate Island being unpleasant, and Wasteland, Frozen, Ocean and Chaotic Wasteland being uninhabitable. Something else they all have in common is their excellent siege potential, as they don't need to bother making any battering rams once they have croc cigars or anything bigger, as they'll tear those gates down before a ram can get even close. I'll cover this more in the battle section, but all of the monsters can eat enemy gates like a light snack. Speaking of battle, all the factions suffer from very long and expensive recruitment, meaning you can be sat for several turns with nothing to do while you wait for your stack to complete. The cost for both recruiting and upkeep can also make it a delicate balancing act in the early game between having a strong army and not going bankrupt. Another thing all the factions have in common is the research tree. It's one of the more difficult ones to navigate, as no matter what you want to do, you need a building to research it, and depending on what that building is, you can be waiting quite a few turns to research anything at all. Once you get it working though, it does offer some great effects to every aspect of your faction. Obviously each faction starts in a different location, and where they start will affect their expansion options. Hexotal start at Hexotal, and can only really expand south as almost all of the land in the north is uninhabitable mountains. Their starting province is also quite useful for a lot of strategic buildings at the Fallen Gates and the Ziggurat of Dawn. The Last Defenders start at the Temple of Skulls, which is in a corner, so they can really expand to the northwest quite freely as long as they cover themselves from being backdoored. Tlaqua start at the Julak Oasis and have the nearby east coast to spread to, which will improve their visibility and economy. After this they can go north or east to take the rest of the southeast desert. Finally we have the Cult of Sotek, who start at Zlanhuapek. They really have a very vulnerable starting location, but it does give them options for expansion as they can move in basically any direction and find habitable land wherever they go. A good first move might be to go towards the east coast to improve their visibility and economy right out the gate. The Cult of Sotek and the Hexotal also start on one of the more resource-rich areas of the map and can have quite a few resources coming in without having to own a huge amount of the map. The commandments are the same for every faction too. They all have some great effects that can be pretty strong at max strength. The alignment of crafting grants +1 to 5 public order, +10 to 50 growth, and +2 to 10% income from all buildings in the province. The alignment of monuments grants +1 to 3 winds of magic reserve to all armies, and +1 to 5% to the research rate. The alignment of order grants -10 to -50% chance of plague spreading and plague duration in the local province, -5 to -25% enemy hero success chance, +1 to 5 siege holdout time, +1 to 5 untainted, and +1 to 5 users of Holy Stellar. Finally, the alignment of war grants +2 to 10 leadership, +3 to 15% weapon strength, -10 to -30% recruitment cost, and +1 to 2 recruit rank all within the local province. Levels 4 and 5 also grant +1 to the global recruitment capacity. Finally, we come to the rites. The Rites of Awakening makes a Slan Mage Priest available for recruitment from any settlement. It costs nothing and has a 10-turn cooldown, but you have to have built the Star Chamber. The Rite of Primeval Glory spawns an army of feral Carnosaurs, Stegodons and Bastillodons at your capital. It also grants the ability to summon feral Cold Ones to all armies. It costs 8,400 gold, lasts 15 turns, and has a 50-turn cooldown. The Rite of Sotek causes attrition for all enemy armies within your territory, grants 50% ambush chance to your armies, plus 15% weapon strength for Skink, Chameleon Skink, and Red Crested Skink units, plus 10 melee attack for Skink, and plus 20% missile damage for all Skink and Pterodon units to all armies. It costs 4,200 gold, lasts 15 turns, and has a 25 turn cooldown. The Rite of Ferocity gives 80 XP per turn to all units, plus 2 recruit rank for all units, plus 25% to post-battle loot, and plus 1 to local recruitment capacity faction-wide. It costs 1,400 gold, lasts 5 turns, and has a 20 turn cooldown. Finally, the Rite of Tsinki, which is exclusive to Tlaqua, and replaces the Rite of Sotek. It grants all armies and characters additional movement for 1 turn only. Any army that uses this movement will be locked in the marching stance for that turn. It costs 2,500 gold, lasts 1 turn, and has a 20 turn cooldown. That concludes this section of the guide on campaign strategy. The next section will cover the unit roster and how I believe each unit is best used, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget to vote on the poll for the next race you want me to make a guide for, which is linked in the description and the comments. If you want to check out the other parts of this or any other guide, there's a link in the card and in the description for a playlist to the series. If you enjoyed this video at any point, please consider leaving it a like, as it really does help out a lot. And if you want to see more of this type of video, make click that subscribe button so you stay up to date. After all, it is free. For now though, I was COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I'll see you next turn.